Because we ain't seen each other in 2 years.
I don't think so.
So that's a good deal, got a good turnout, a good crowd. So welcome to the BamaCarry Freedom Conference. This is going to be one of the most exciting conferences we've ever had. And I think it's going to be one that you can talk about until we meet again in 2023. And with just a little bit of luck, and with the Lord on our side, when 2023 comes back, we can come without no permits. I'll talk about that a little bit more toward the end. But just as a reminder today, keep all your guns holstered. And while our guests are speaking, since we got politicians all around the wall, and we got the store in the back, please, if you got to talk, let it be in a whisper. Okay, because these people have come from a long way off, and we want to hear everything they got to say. Take just a minute to turn your ringer off on your phone. I'm going to do mine right now. And just for a little bit of information, we now have 3 brand new pistols up here that we're going to give away today. 2 of those are from BamaCarry. One was a donation that walked in the door today and said, here, I got this brand new pistol. I want y'all to give it away. So we got 3. All the more reason for you to go back there to the price, to the store and buy you some extra tickets. Everybody should have gotten 1 ticket when they came in. You can buy more. Everybody's got a dog in the hunt, but if you want more dogs in the hunt, you can see them at the store back there. Tickets are $5 a piece or 5 for 20. That's right, isn't it, Mike? That's right, okay. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, the youth shirts that we have, we got a fair number of youth shirts back there for your grandkids or your kids. We got them $5 a piece. So y'all, we need to get those going. And these words are for the people here who are running for office. If you're running for an office here, can you hold your hand up so everybody knows who you are? You're running for office, okay. I want you to hear these words and I want you to hear them good. And I believe that I'm going to take a little bit of liberty to speak for the folks sitting in these chairs around me. We have been fooled by politicians too many times. That's the reason there's not one up here speaking today. Not one. But just know, we have learned, and we've been through some hard knocks, but we are still growing and getting bigger. We're looking for those who are not afraid to take a stand, even if you're standing by yourself. Hold it down in the back if you will. I hear you all the way up here. We're looking for representatives who are not afraid to get their hands dirty, fighting for our freedoms and the overreaching arm of the federal government and the Alabama government. We're looking for people who will represent us, who will work for the people, not the bureaucrats. And I just want to say, this is not an endorsement, but we have Zoom calls with some of the people running. And like it or not, that's up to you. But I did want to let you know that we had a large Zoom call meeting the other day with one of the candidates. And of all the candidates running for office that I've ever spoken to, he's the only one that has ever mentioned the Federalist Papers to me. How many of you know what the Federalist Papers are? How many of you read a little bit of them? Man, that is awesome. That is awesome. So like it or not, that made an impression. And his table is right over here. So I didn't call his name. You can look, and Mr. Reed can wait. So before we get started, I want to leave you with this thought today. The deeper I get into politics, and I never did intend to get in politics. I was perfectly happy being in Tuscaloosa, having our group, and just talking about gun rights and freedoms and trying to educate people. But the deeper I get into the politics of gun rights, the more I realize we need legislators with constitutional moral convictions. Or maybe we need legislators with constitutional criminal convictions. I don't know which one it is. So you think about that. We do need constitutional moral convictions in our legislators, but some of them need constitutional criminal convictions. Big time. Especially those in the feds. So, that being said, we're gonna go ahead and kick this off. I think I have run my time, and I'm real close. Our first speaker is Tom Sandner. Where you at? There he is, okay. Tom was born and raised in Alton, Illinois. He entered the U.S. Army in 1982 under the high school to flight school program. He's a veteran of Desert Shield Storm and retired from the Army in 2002. He's qualified as a pilot in the UH-1 Hewitt helicopter, the OH-58 helicopter, a maintenance test pilot in the OH-58, a scout attack helicopter, and the AH-1 Cobra attack helicopter. So I guess if you want to go anywhere in a helicopter, this may be the guy. He now works for Iron Mountain Solutions as a support contractor for PEO Aviation of Redstone Arsenal in the International Apache office. Tom has got a BS and an MS from Embry-Riddle in Professional Aeronautics. Can you fold a paper airplane and make it fly?
Sometimes.
Okay. Tom and his wife Susan are members of the Rock Family Worship Center and have been married for 38 years. They have 2 boys, and in his spare time, Tom likes to go camping, teach Revolutionary War history and rifle marksmanship with Project Appleseed, and host U.S. Constitution classes with Patriot Academy. Oh, wait. Y'all know we always start with a pledge and a prayer, right? Okay. Stand by, Tom. If y'all will stand for me. And remain standing after the pledge or prayer, and then keep standing, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the blessing of this day, to God. Just thank you so much that we're able to gather together to God in freedom. We thank you so much for the freedom that we have in our country, to God. And to God, I pray that we don't just take our freedom for granted, to God. We fight to keep our freedom, to God. Thank you for this group here today, to God. Just ask your blessings upon what goes on here today, to God, for the speakers, to God. I pray, to God, they might motivate us enough that we want to get involved and make a difference in our country, to God. And I do pray for our country, to God. Our country needs healing, to God. And it needs good people to stand up for the truth, to God, and do what's right. And as we leave here today, to God, I pray that everybody's here will have safe travels home, to God. And I just want to thank you so much for all my many blessings. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red flag above bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. As Eddie told you, my name is Tom Sandner, and I am a volunteer with the Revolutionary War Veterans Association's Project Appleseed. At Project Appleseed, our mission, our goal is to inspire our nation to remember the history, the heritage, the legacy left to us by our founding fathers. to teach our nation where we came from, because she's forgotten where she's going, because she doesn't know where she came from. We do that by conducting marksmanship clinics throughout the country. As a part of those clinics, we teach the history of 19 April 1775. That's the day of the shot heard around the world, the battles of Lexington and Concord. We teach that history in what we call 3 strikes of a match. You know, sometimes you pull a match out of the book and you hit it on the striker, and the first time maybe all of you gets a spark. You hit it again, maybe you get a few more sparks and maybe a little whiff of smoke, and you hit it that 3rd time and it burst into flames. It's kind of the way things happened on that day. That history is the subject of my talk today. What Appleseed is not. We are not anything illegal, subversive, or anti-government. We are not a modern-day militia, and we are not a modern political organization. We will not discuss politics at our events. We see our nation as a great ship, and she struck an iceberg. We're not going to discuss, debate, or argue whether that iceberg came from the left or the right. We're sinking, we're taking on water. We want as many people as possible to help us patch holes and bail water. You do that by taking advantage of this incredible system of representative government our founders put here for us. You have to know who your representatives are. You have to make sure they know who you are, and they know your position on the issues. And if they don't listen, you replace them with some different representatives. So with that, 19 April 1775. The events of this day were not spontaneous. It wasn't on a whim that all the colonists were sitting around at Dunkin' Donuts and over a cup of coffee say, hey guys, I know what we should do. Let's pick a fight. Let's pick a fight with the best trained, best equipped, largest military in the world and see how that works out for us. What do you say, guys? No, this has been coming for quite some time, but most specifically since the end of the French and Indian War in 1763. It was a very expensive war, and when it was over, England found herself very much in debt. Parliament was looking for a way to pay off that debt. Parliament decided to look over at the colonists. Let's tax them. Let's get them to help pay for it. You know, colonists had a different opinion. For one, they figured that they paid their fair share. They paid it in the bloodshed and the lives lost of their friends, neighbors, and relatives that helped fight that war. But more importantly, colonists did not have any representation in Parliament. Has anybody ever heard the term no taxation without representation? Parliament wasn't too concerned about what the colonists thought, so in 1764 they passed the Sugar Act. 1765 were the Stamp and the Quartering Acts. 1767 and 1768 the Townshend Acts. With each new act, the colonists would resist and rebel that much more fervently than the time before. British soldiers were stationed in Boston to enforce the Townshend Acts. Friction between the soldiers and the colonists brought us the Boston Massacre in March of 1770. Crackdown on imports, crackdown on smuggling and restriction on imports and exports and a tax on tea brought us the Boston Tea Party in December of 1773. General Thomas Gage, Royal Governor and Commander of British forces in Boston, needed a way to control the colonists. He needed to limit their ability to resist and to rebel. He figured a good way to do that would be to confiscate all the powder and the ball that they had stored in their local powder houses. Every community had a powder house where the bulk of that powder and ball were stored. You only kept a little bit of it at home. You needed to protect your family and livestock from predators, and you needed to do some hunting. But it's a little unstable. You don't want large amounts of it around your fireplace and your wood-burning stove and your candles and your oil lamps. So most of it was kept in the local powder houses. General Gage sends his troops out, and on 1 September 1774, they are very successful at confiscating all the powder and the ball in the provincial powder house just northwest of Boston. About 250 barrels of powder that day. They were also very successful in alarming the colonists as to just what General Gage's intentions were, and we know it today as the powder alarm. As a result of that powder alarm, the colonists stepped up their vigilance. The Sons of Liberty improved and refined their systems of spies, signals, and alarm riders. One of those alarm riders was a man you've probably heard of named Paul Revere. They also stepped up their training in their militia. Since the French and Indian War had ended over a decade ago, the militia became more of a social group. They were more likely to go to the tavern, have a drink, and talk about drills and marksmanship rather than actually practice it. After the powder alarm, that changed too, and they stepped up their training. As a result of the increased vigilance and the improved abilities of the militia, the next 2 times General Gage sent his troops out, They were not so successful. So Parliament issues orders: disarm the colonists and capture the leaders of the Sons of Liberty, or those seditious rebels, as they were known in England at the time. Well, General Gage knows from his spies, Tories, local colonists still loyal to the crown, that John Hancock and Samuel Adams were staying in Lexington. And there was a very large store of munitions at Colonel Barrett's farm just outside of Concord. So he makes his plans. He's going to send his troops out through Lexington, capture Hancock and Adams, and continue on out to Concord and confiscate all the munitions out there. Now he knows he's being watched. He knows he has to keep this a secret. Best way to keep a secret? You don't tell anybody. And he didn't tell anybody. No one, that is, except for Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, who would be leading the mission on that day. Despite his best efforts, you still have to make preparations when the operation is going to be this large. General Gage asked the Navy to prepare for a movement of troops by boat across the backwater from Boston into Cambridge. 7 April, the Navy lets their longboats down from their ships and moors them under the sterns. The Whigs in Boston witnessed this activity. There are reports of British officers scouting the roads to Lexington and Concord. Put all this information together with a few other things, and the Sons of Liberty figured that it must be going to happen real soon. So on the 8th of April, they sent Paul Revere out to Lexington and Concord to warn the colonists of the impending march. Turns out to be a false alarm. Convinced that they are right about the mission, just wrong about the day, they continue to watch and observe. 16 April, Paul Revere again goes out to Lexington and updates Hancock and Adams on the latest events. Dr. Joseph Warren had a confidential source. This source was connected at the highest levels of the British military. The identity of this source was so confidential that Dr. Warren is the only one that knew who it was. And he took that information faithfully with him to his grave. This source could only be contacted in the most dire of circumstances, and Dr. Warren decides this is just one of those times. We do not know who that source was. Many believe it was General Gage's own wife, Margaret. Margaret was born in America. She loved America. She was sympathetic to the Patriot cause. Living in the Gage household, she would have had plenty of opportunity to overhear discussions between General Gage and Colonel Smith. And shortly after the events of 19 April, she was sent back to England and never allowed to return. Whoever it was, Dr. Warren contacts them. And after doing so, about 10 p.m. the night of 18 April, he tells Paul Revere, the march is imminent, sound the alarm. Paul Revere heads over to the home of Robert Newman and tells him the signal in the steeple of the Old North Church shall be 2 lanterns. And then Paul Revere goes down to the water's edge, where he's met by 2 men with a rowboat. He's to be rowed across into Charlestown. They have to row right past the HMS Somerset. It's a full moon night. They avoid detection by rowing in her shadows. The men of Charlestown have seen this signal and spring into action. Some of them head over to the home of Deacon Markin and fetch a fine, fast mare named Brown Beauty. Others go down the water's edge and wait for the arrival of Paul Revere. Revere arrives on shore, mounts up on Brown Beauty, and heads off to sound the alarm. Now, Paul Revere does not go galloping through the streets shouting out, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Does anyone know why he would not have said, "The British are coming"?
Everybody was British.
Everybody was British. Remember, this is April of 75. Remember that party we had every 4th of July? Yeah, that wasn't until July of 76, so at this point we're all British. Wouldn't have made any sense to anyone. His message would have been the regulars are coming out. And he didn't just go galloping through the streets shouting that out either. As I said, this was a well-planned out or an organized mission. There were prearranged meeting locations. It might be a meeting house, a tavern, a church, whatever it was in that community. Paul Revere would stop, relay the message, other riders would go out from there, and Revere would continue on. Paul Revere was not the only rider that night. Dr. Warren also sent out William Dawes. William Dawes would take the southern route across Boston Neck and up through Cambridge. There's a third rider whose name we do not know. Now let's just assume that you have information about an event that's going to happen tomorrow. It is absolutely imperative that you have to get as many people together by tomorrow at this time as you possibly can. Anybody here think they can get 50 people to show up? Yeah, most folks will be doing good to get 10. Estimates are by the end of the day on 19 April, 24 hours later, there had been as many as 14,000 notified and responding to the call of arms. Only about 4,000 actually made it to Lexington and Concord in time to participate, but think on that for a moment. 14,000, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, no phones. Quite an accomplishment, quite a well-organized system. So Paul Revere, William Dawes, the others are out riding, sounding the alarm. Colonel Smith is waking his soldiers up at their barracks in Boston. British officers had no respect for colonial militia. They saw them utterly contemptible as a military force. So they didn't see any reason to make any special preparations. Remember, the soldiers don't know why they're being woke up. Colonel Smith is the only one that knows what this mission is, where they're going, and why. So he gets his men formed up out in the street. They have their standard equipment. That'd be powder and ball to fire their muskets 36 times, and rations and water for 1 day. They're marched silently through the streets of Boston. At one point, they even bayonet a barking dog to keep it quiet. They too are marched down to Water's Edge, where they're to be rowed over into Cambridge. They're headed for a place called Blackmere Point. First problem, they get down to Water's Edge and find out there's not enough boats to get them all across in one trip. So they have to make multiple trips, delaying Colonel Smith's advance. They're headed for Blackmere Point because it appears very dark and secluded, uninhabited. It will reduce their chances of being detected. When they get to Blackmere Point, they find out, sure enough, it's uninhabited. It's uninhabited because it's a swamp. So now they're forced to get out of their boats in water up to their middles, waist and chest deep. Remember, we're talking Boston in April. I'm thinking that water's cold. So now they got to trudge up through the water and the muddy banks and get reformed up on the shore. Quite a bit of confusion going on. Colonel Smith was not the only element of General Gage's plan that day. He had also planned for a relief column to be led by General Hugh Percy, who was supposed to leave at 4 a.m. on the 19th. Again, due to the excessive secrecy, General Percy was late getting his orders, and his unit would not leave until about 9 a.m., 5 hours late. There were also small patrols out on the roads between Lexington and Concord to stop riders just like Revere and Dawes and the others. Colonel Smith's trying to get his men marching. Paul Revere arrives in Lexington. He goes to the home of the Reverend Jonas Clark, where Hancock and Adams are staying. As he approaches the home, he finds it being guarded by Sergeant William Monroe and a few other soldiers of the Lexington militia. As he approaches the home, he calls out to Sergeant Monroe, and Sergeant Monroe says, "Shh, you're going to wake up everyone inside." Paul Revere says, "Keep down the noise." Paul Revere says, "Noise? You don't have noise soon enough. The regulars are coming out." Samuel Adams hears all the ruckus, throws open the window, looks outside, recognizes Paul Revere, and invites him in. Revere goes in, tells Adams and Hancock what's going on, urges them, please, get out of here, go someplace safe. John Hancock and Samuel Adams look at the Reverend Clark and ask him, "Do you think the townspeople of Lexington will fight?" Reverend Clark responds, "I have trained them for this very hour." Paul Revere continues on, sound the alarm. Having received the message in Lexington, the Lexington militia begin to form up on Lexington Green. The Lexington militia consists of approximately 70 men ages 16 to 66. They're led by Captain John Parker. Captain Parker is 46 years old. He's a veteran of the French and Indian War. He's a husband, he's a farmer, he's a father, and he's in the advanced stages of tuberculosis. How many excuses did he have? I'm too busy, I don't have time, I've paid my debts, I'm sick. No, he knows how critical the cause of liberty is, so he joins up with his men. The 16-year-old was the fifer, named Jonathan Harrington. It is now around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and Jonathan's mother will go into his bedroom. "Jonathan, get up. The regulars are coming out. Something must be done." How many of you know a mother is going to wake up their teenage child to go stand out here in the middle of town square with 70 old farts like sitting in this room and me, and wait for what today's equivalent would be an battalion of the 82nd Airborne marching down the road? You going to send your teenage kid out there? She too knows how critical the cause of liberty is. They form up on Lexington Green. Captain Parker sends 2 scouts back towards Boston to verify the alarm. A couple hours later, the first scout comes back. "Captain Parker, we can't find anybody. There's no one out there. It must be another false alarm." On the strength of that report, Captain Parker dismisses his men, but he tells them, "Don't go too far, guys. Let's wait a little bit and verify this one. Stay within sound of the musketry drum." Most of them decided to wait it out in Buckman's Tavern. Now, these men had just formed up on the green getting ready for a fight, so like any good militiamen, they'd all loaded their muskets. They're getting ready to go into the tavern. They know about firearm safety, social norms. You don't walk into the tavern with a loaded musket, so they have to unload it. Unload that musket, you just drop the magazine, rack the bolt, and check it. No? How do you unload a musket? You shoot it. So this group of guys points their muzzles off in the safe directions, fires off that round, and they go on into the tavern, sit down, and wait for further instruction. Paul Revere and William Dawes met up in Lexington and decided to ride on to Concord together. They get on their way just a little bit, and they run across Dr. Samuel Prescott. Dr. Prescott lived in Concord, but he'd been in Lexington that night courting his fiancée. They talked to Dr. Prescott for a little while and find out he is, too, a staunch Whig, supported the Patriot cause, and a son of liberty himself. They asked him to join them, which he agrees to do. They ride on a little further and run smack into one of those patrols that General Gage had sent out there. Dawes is unhorsed but able to escape on foot. Dr. Prescott jumps his horse over a small stone wall and disappears into the night. Paul Revere was captured. Soldiers are harassing Paul Revere a bit. An officer walks up, calms him down in a rather gentlemanly tone of voice, says, "Sir, may I crave your name?" Very matter-of-factly, Paul Revere says, "I'm Paul Revere." Paul Revere continues on to tell them what he's out doing that night and why they were sent to stop him. Now, they're stunned on a couple of points. One, they knew about and heard of Paul Revere. They didn't think they'd ever catch him. Two, they don't know why they're out there. Why should he? He continues on to tell them there are some 500 militia formed up at Lexington, and for any British regular to go there would be certain death. It's a slight stretch of the truth designed to protect Hancock and Adams. And this patrol was a little bit skeptical about Paul Revere's story until they hear this volley of musket fire coming from the direction of Lexington, more specifically the direction of Buckman's Tavern. Lends a little credibility to the story. They decide they need to report this. Now, they've been capturing riders all night, so they've got several. They can't keep all these guys and still go file their report. They decide to let them go. No horses, they're now on foot. On foot, it's a little bit too far to walk into Concord, so Paul Revere turns around and walks into Lexington, goes back over to the Clark parsonage to ensure that Hancock and Adams had listened and gone out and gotten someplace safe. Now, they're sitting there in the parlor discussing the events of the morning and what they should do about it. Paul Revere relays again the latest series of events, or he said, "Please, guys, get out of town." And they finally do. They load up into John Hancock's heavy wagon and they ride off to Woburn. Also about that time, the second scout comes back. Captain Parker, not only are the regulars out, they're just at the Rocks. The Rocks was a landmark, maybe 20, 30 minutes outside of town. Captain Parker has his drummer, another teenage boy named William Diamond, sound muster. As his men are forming up on Lexington Green, he gives them these orders. Now remember again, we're talking militia. These are all local people of Lexington, friends, neighbors, relatives. All of them were members of the Reverend Clark's church. Of these 70 men, there were 14 family names. And these are the orders. Any man who offers to run will be shot down. Stand your ground. Do not fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. The lead elements of the British regulars comes into view. They're led by Lieutenant Jesse Adair. Lieutenant Adair can look up ahead and see the militia formed up on Lexington Green, and he has a decision to make, and to make quickly. Does he continue on his assigned route, going on to Concord, exposing the flanks of his column to a formed militia, or does he deviate from his route and pull his men up into battle formation? He decides to do the latter. As he's departing from his route and pulling his men up into formation from further back in the column, Major Pitcairn sees what's going on and quickly rides to the front. He calls out to the militia, "Throw down the arms, ye villains! Throw down the arms and disperse!" Now obviously these 70 guys are all very brave or they wouldn't be out there in the first place, but they're not stupid. There's 70 of them. Right now there are about 250 British regulars in town and more coming in all the time. Captain Parker issues the orders to disperse, which they begin to do. About that time, a shot rings out. We do not know who fired that first shot. What we do know is once that shot was fired, the British soldiers, without orders, began to shoot at the militia as they were obeying orders to disperse. First a little bit ragged, then into a full volley. Jonas Parker had declared, "I'm not running. This is where I make my stand. I'm not moving." He had symbolically taken his hat, put it between his feet, and stacked his spare musket balls in there. He and Sergeant Monroe were the only two shot down on the green where they mustered. All the others were shot, obeying the orders to disperse. Jonathan Harrington, the older Jonathan Harrington, the uncle of the Pfeiffers, suffered a gaping chest wound. His wife and 8-year-old son would watch in horror from the front steps of their house as he crawls back and dies in his wife's arms. 17-year-old Isaac Muzzy would die at his father's feet. Some of the men were still in the town meeting house when the shooting started. As they were coming out, one of them was shot and another was bayonet. Joshua Simmons had run upstairs into the meeting house where some of the powder was stored. He thrust the muzzle of his musket into a keg of powder, determined to blow up the magazine rather than let it get captured. And some of the British soldiers did start their way up the stairs, but about that time Colonel Smith finally arrives on the scene, sees the chaos and the undisciplined actions of his soldiers, and he has his drummer sound muster. When the shooting stopped and the smoke had cleared, there'd be 8 militia dead and 9 wounded. Only one of the British regulars was injured with a slight thigh wound. When he gets them back in formation, Colonel Smith finally tells his men what their mission is and where they're going. They're appalled to learn that he intends to continue on with this mission. Obviously, the element of surprise is gone. They're outnumbered. Militia screaming in from all around, but he has his orders and he intends to obey them. To boost their morale, he allows them a cheer and a victory volley. Huzzah! 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 And then they march off to Concord. Picture yourself a resident of Lexington. You just watched your army massacre your friends, your neighbors, and your relatives, and after they did it, they cheered. They fired a victory volley, and then they marched on to Concord. Leave a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth? I know it would in mine. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the first strike of the match. I will be back a little later today to continue this story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Anybody learn anything? Every time I learn something new, I just hope I can remember this old head of mine. Our next speaker is Shirley Watral. Shirley is an NRA certified firearms instructor, speaker, and author of Amazon bestseller Heels to Holster. This book is a memoir of how she discovered the warrior inside as she survived an abusive relationship and thrived in the aftermath. After a long career as a senior manager with Florida County government, she decided to create a new path for her future. After being introduced to a local gun club, she decided to pursue learning more about shooting and firearm safety, and today she is proud to say that she has taken dozens of classes and has conducted many training sessions for both men and women. She has a passion for educating women on how to handle firearms safely so they can become their own first responder. She wrote her book, Heels to Holster, because of her desire to empower others by sharing her own life story. She wants to help other survivors of domestic violence to build positively upon whatever has happened to them and become a warrior for life. She serves as the DC Project Florida State Director. The DC Project is a nonpartisan organization of women for gun rights with their focus on developing relations with lawmakers. Their mission is to raise awareness among the community and legislation that firearm safety and violence prevention are achieved through education, not legislation. Please make welcome Ms. Shirley.
Wow, that's quite an introduction. Sometimes I listen to that and I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I? Because none of that stuff was on my bucket list. I'll start there. But I'm so honored to be here today, and I feel so awesome to see you guys open carry. That just makes my heart just go alive. Wish I could do that. I'm from Naples, Florida, and we don't open carry. Not yet. Maybe someday. But I always find it very uplifting and energizing to be around like-minded people that believe in the Second Amendment and are ready to fight to secure that Second Amendment. And I haven't been able to do that for a few years because of events being canceled and some other reasons, so it's exciting to be here. And today, I am going to talk about something that you don't discuss very often when you're with your family or with your friends at coffee. It's kind of like that elephant in the middle of the room. I'm going to talk to you about domestic violence. Now, domestic violence, by definition, is partners in a relationship or a marriage when one or both of them do physical and mental damage to the other to seek control. Pretty simple. They just want to take control, whatever it takes to do that. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence statistics state that 1 in 4 women will be severely abused at some time in their life. Severely is defined as stabbed, beaten, strangled, but that number, 1 in 4, I never realized that. And to be honest with you, before my whole incident, my horrific incident, I always wondered why women in abusive relationships didn't just leave, you know? Someone's gonna smack you around, just get up and go, right? Doesn't that make sense? That's what I thought. And it wasn't until I found myself locked in my apartment, 2 o'clock in the morning, all the lights out, curled up in the corner of my bedroom, peeking out the vertical blinds, trying to move them so I could see out and nobody could see in if they were looking in, wondering if he was going to come after me. At that point, I realized fear can freeze you right in your tracks, and that's what it did to me. I was at a point I didn't know what to do. I had just gone through a horror movie. Basically, I felt like I was thrown into a horror movie. And now I had been fighting for my freedom. Excuse me. I had got my freedom, but now I couldn't even move. I was just stuck there. So, yeah, domestic violence is the same but different in a lot of cases. And what I mean by that is the number of incidents that it can happen may vary, but the outcome is the same. They want to instill fear and low self-esteem and mental and physical damage. Sometimes if there's kids involved or a financial situation where maybe the woman doesn't think she can make it on her own, that's why they stay. And I understand that a little better now since I had to live through part of it. My situation was a one-time deal. Basically, I was able to distance myself from that person after it happened, but then it turned into a life-threatening situation. It wasn't a situation where you're just going to fade into the sunset. No, it got worse. It was to the point where my life was in danger. And I found that the reason I wrote my book, Heels to Holster, was when I started to speak to women about firearm safety and about my story. And I used to, when I was teaching the classes, I found out that these women would come up to me afterwards and say, "You told me my story. You just repeated my story." And I'm going, how can that be? How can this be happening so much? And what can I do about it? So through that, through my students and the other women I've met in the firearm industry, they said, you should put this in words. You could help other women. And that's why I did it. And you might even just want to take a look around the room right now and see how many women are sitting out there. Just think about that number and really put it in perspective. 1 in 4 women will be or have been severely abused by somebody they know at some point in their life. Now, I had to think about it. There was a time when, how did I go from, I had a successful career, I was in what I thought was a loving, caring relationship, to the point that I was huddled in my bedroom, scared to death to do anything. Well, what happened was this person that I thought really loved and cared for me started to change. It was a gradual change. It didn't come overnight. And it's kind of like, well, let me be honest with you. I don't cook. And I've never gone frog eating. But I'm told that the way you cook a frog is you put it in a pot of water and you gradually turn up the heat. Well, and the frog doesn't even realize it's being cooked until it's too late and it's all done. Well, that was kind of me. And the point where I realized that was this person had started to change. So what I did, I distanced myself from him, right? I'm going to gradually break away from him. You know, we can be friends, do all that kind of stuff. So I started doing more things on my own. I was going out with my friends, and this one night I went to a co-ed volleyball game, had a great time, was playing volleyball, did really good, came home, locked the door, went into my bathroom, taking a shower, right? Everything's cool, had a great night, shut off the water, pulled back the curtain, there he stood. Now, woo! Right now, that even, I can feel that the hairs on the back of my neck just stood up. Because it's just like that, what's that movie? Psycho? You know? It was just like all of a sudden I'm like, what the heck's going on? There he did. He stood right there in front of me. I had locked the door. And I'm, what now do I do? You know, my heart's beating out of my chest. I can't move, can't think. And all of a sudden, he starts interrogating me. You know, where you been? Who you with? Why did you invite me? This whole thing. So I'm trying to ease the situation. Finally convinced him, and he left. And I'm like, okay, now I get it. That's when I realized I was a frog in the boiling water. This had gone way beyond anything I could ever imagine. So the next morning, what do? Makes sense, right? You change the lock on your apartment. Yes, I went down to the office, said, hey, I need my apartment locks changed. Okay. You think that would take care of the situation and my intrusion into my private life in my home? No. Sometimes people can be so charming and cunning at the same time that they can get people to do things they wouldn't normally do. So what did he do? He went down, later I find this out, I didn't know at the time. He went down to the office for the apartment, convinced them that he should have a key to my place. Told him some kind of story, surprising me, I don't even remember what it was, but he convinced them to give him a key. Now the more I distanced myself away from this person, I still felt like I was being watched. Someone was watching me. And I found out later it was either him, and he also hired a private investigator. Now all of this is going on over a period of time. I'm a very private person. I was born in Northwest Pennsylvania. I was raised on a farm. We had a lot of animals. None of this stuff ever happened in my life. I didn't know anything about it. So this was all something that, I'm like, why me? What did I do? You know, first thing, what did I do to deserve this? So I tell you that, you know, that little sense that you get inside, that sixth sense, the gut feeling. Well, I was getting those at times, and I would ignore them because why? This person cared and loved me, so I thought. So I had this great career, what I thought at the time was a great relationship, which no longer was. And all of a sudden, my quiet life with a great career and a nice relationship turned into me being thrown into this horror movie. It's the only way I can explain it. What happened is one Saturday I get a phone call. I'm in Florida, that's where I live now, during this whole thing. It's nice and sunny out, everything's cool. I don't have a cell phone yet. So it's a landline, I don't have caller ID. So I pick up the phone and who is it? It's him. Anytime I do that, he answers the phone, my heart just goes, oh, now what? So before he started to change into this animal, this terrorizing person, I had two cats. One my parents brought down when they moved down north, and the two didn't get along. So he said, oh, I'll take care of one, being the kind gentleman he is. And he happened to take the one that had the heart condition. So Shirley, being raised on a farm, an animal lover, he knew how to push the buttons. He said, you need to come over here right away. Something's wrong with Pace, that's the cat's name. And she won't take her medicine. Now, my gut feeling kicked in, and I went, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And he kept going on and convincing me that I should. His house was like one street over from the apartment complex. So finally I said, okay, I'll come over. Thinking to myself, I'll go over, see what's going on, and I just won't go in the house, I'll just stand outside and figure everything out. So I drove on over there, and I'm standing outside the door, and gut feeling saying, don't go in the door. Don't go in the door. And he answers the door, I'm in the entryway, and he keeps convincing me that I need to go help this cat. And I kept going, all right, Shirley, it's your gut feeling. He's not going to hurt you. This is someone that cared about you. Go on, it's going to be fine. Just go take care of the situation and come back out. Well, what happened was, as soon as I stepped over that threshold, into the door, it's kind of like something's different. Something's different. I'm not sure what, but something's different. But I kept walking. I kept walking because I had a mission. I've got to find and help this cat. So I keep walking, and then I hear the door go into the garage open. I hear the garage door going down, and as soon as, that mechanical sound you hear when you push that garage door button? That was like the jail cell had just locked. It's at that point that I realized what was different. That house that always had the curtains open, it was bright and cheery. Everything was dark. All the curtains were drawn. And at that moment, oh, crap. How do I say that? And I was like, turned to go away. He was right on my tracks, and he forced me into the master bedroom. And I knew at that point, this wasn't good. This wasn't good. I had to get out of there no matter what. I had to get out of there somehow. So as I'm being forced into the bedroom, there's this huge walk-in closet. Once again, something's different about that. What is it? In the corner, there's nothing in there except a blanket neatly folded with a pillow on it. Now, right then, you wouldn't think much of it, but that hit me like, oh my God, that's going to be my place. He's going to lock me in the closet. So I was told that, I was pushed down on the floor and said, okay, you can only kneel or sit. You can't do anything else. You have to kneel or sit on the floor. Right then, I no longer had any freedoms. That was his house was now my prison for the next 15 hours. And I had given up my freedom. I couldn't go to the bathroom without him escorting me. See, what I'm trying to point out, when you go into relationships, I never anticipated this, and everything was so gradual, and now all of a sudden I'm in this situation, and now what do I do? What do I do? How do I get out of this situation? So I tried numerous times to get away. I fought him, and I didn't have any self-defense training. I didn't own a gun. I did own a gun. Yeah, that's right. My ex-husband bought me a gun. I shot it maybe once, but that was about it. I didn't know much else about guns. But, you watch the movies and you're supposed to, go for their eyes and do all this. I didn't do a darn thing except piss him off. And all I got was bruises, bite marks, and whiplash from him pulling my hair. So he got a little desperate. And of course I was getting a little tired because I would try and fight my way out. And so what did he do? He brought out a case and he put it on the bed, opened it up, pulled out a gun. So now the gun's sitting on the bed with this white rag that had black stains, which now I know that's what you clean your guns with. So it was sitting right there, and I went, okay, this is it. It's showdown time. I can make a stand, fight for my life, because I'm going to go out kicking. I'm going out kicking and screaming. It's a little farm girl. She's got a little guts in there. So I did. I thought, okay, I'm gonna get to that gun, I'm gonna press that trigger, the gun's gonna go off, the neighbors are gonna call the police, right? That was my goal. So I did, I tried. I jumped up, jumped on the bed, grabbed the gun, he jumped on me, ended up on the floor, the gun is over, I'm laying on my stomach, the gun's out over my head, he's on top of me, and I finally was able to press the trigger. So what's the loudest noise in a gunfight? Click. I didn't know that, but now I do. That was, I'm like, you kidding me, the click? Nothing at all. The gun didn't go off. So I'm still fighting. I'm trying to hit him on the head with it. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna go ditch effort, gonna start screaming as loud as I can. Started that, and all of a sudden he's putting that cloth in my mouth and yanking on my head. It was my last ditch effort. And finally, of course, as cunning as he was, he had something else in mind. So he realized I wasn't going to go down without a fight. So the next thing he tells me is, I got a contract out on your parents. I have until 11 p.m. to call these people who are going to go ahead and kill my parents, to negate the contract. Otherwise, they're going to be dead. Well, now you just turned your tables on me, right? Because before it was only my life, and that was it. I was going to fight for it no matter what. But now you're telling me my parents' lives are involved? That's a whole different story. So finally I said, okay, you win, I give up, whatever you want. And it was almost, this is the crazy part, and I still don't understand people sometimes. It was just like a light switch. All of a sudden, he said, okay, let's order a pizza and watch a movie. I had just spent the last 15 hours by now fighting for my life, and now it's like, oh, let's just order a pizza, watch a movie, and hang out. Now, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm not hungry, thank you very much. But we went in, we turned on the TV, ordered the pizza, he's watching the movie, and finally I convinced him, I said, I need to go back to my apartment. So, thinking, I guess, that he won, he said, okay. So I drove back to my apartment, and that's how I ended up huddled in my bedroom, scared to death to do anything. I had fought for my life, I had done everything I could to get free. Now that I was free, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. You might ask, because I asked myself this, why didn't I just drive to the police department? I have no idea. Because I guess at some point, part of me thought my home was still a little safe. But I sat there and I cried and I cried and I cried. And finally I got the nerve and I said, okay, I got to do something. So I called one of my friends. They came over, picked me up, took me, and I ended up living with them for a while. And I did everything that you're supposed to do in the legal system, right? You're supposed to get a restraining order, so I did that. And I thought, okay, next thing I need to do, I need to be in a guarded community. So we can't just come talk people into giving them the keys to my place and come in. So I did that. Not only was it gated, but it had a security guard there 24/7. Even better, right? And you think that would have stopped the situation. No. He was going to fight that too. He fought all the legal systems as well. He went in and he fought the restraining order. I did not know you could fight a restraining order. Yeah, you can. I had to get an attorney to try to keep that restraining order in place. He fought that. Not only that, he tried to convince people I instigated the whole thing. He was saying, I instigated it, he had to defend himself. That's why I had bruise marks, bite marks, and whiplash, because I was attacking him. Now, I do understand domestic violence, it doesn't have any boundaries. It doesn't matter what sex you are, what race you are, what your financial situation, it doesn't matter. But in this case, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You think I'm gonna attack you? So he fought that for a while, and then he realized that wasn't going to do any good. So the next thing he starts to do, he wants me dead. Basically, he's had it. He wants to kill me. And he starts planning things. I mean, I find this all out later. He was very meticulous. He has different avenues that he was going to do it. And it's only by the grace of God, and I say that again, it's only by the grace of God I stand here today, because the form of how he was going to kill me happened to be, he had to purchase something, and he purchased it from an informant for the law enforcement. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I know that. And like I said, it's by the grace of God I'm here today. And for that reason, when he went to this informant, then they started doing an investigation. And then that even drew things out more, because here I was, I just wanted to get back to my quiet little life, my great little career, and that's it. That's all I wanted. When can I do that? Well, now I have to pretend nothing's going on, because I have to go into an investigation, I have to get evidence, and this seemed like months and months. It just seemed longer than it was. But I made it, as you can see, yay! And because of this, today, I'm doing things I never thought I could do. I never thought I would do. Things that weren't on my bucket list. I never thought of, Paul's gonna hold up the book. I never thought I'd write a book called Heels to Holster, let alone live through an attack on my life, survive domestic violence. I never thought I would do that. I never thought I'd stand in front of people and educate them about domestic violence. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be a certified firearms instructor and love it so much that I became a competition shooter. But all these things were made possible because I survived that situation. I survived that situation. Now, lots of times, these days now, everybody wants to change history. They're offended by this, that, and the other thing. But as traumatic as that whole event was, that it was like being thrown into a horror movie of my own where I'm starring it, I wouldn't change a thing. Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met so many awesome people in the firearms industry. And they are. Since I've been working in the firearms industry or in any of this, conventions and stuff, people are so real. The firearms industry, people like you, supporting the Second Amendment, you're so real, down to earth, kind, caring, responsible. And I just love being around you all. And yeah, even hanging out with your board over here, your band board, they're quite entertaining, I must say. And I'm so grateful to have met you guys and been able to hang out with you. But there was a point where I said I survived, but then there's that point where I started living again. That happened when I took my first firearms class. And make sure I don't go over my time slot. When my first firearms class, okay, it was an 8-hour class. I knew I was going to be the only one going. None of my friends were anywhere interested in doing that. But I had this firearm for years sitting in my bedstand, and I didn't know how to use it. So I need to use it. I'm ready to learn how to defend myself. And this was years from the actual event that took place. So I went there knowing I wouldn't know anybody. I was intimidated. I had low self-esteem. I was scared. I was like, what am I getting into? But I went anyway. And it was 4 hours in the classroom and 4 hours on the range. And what happened was I met some really awesome people. And of course, now it's changing. More women are taking firearms classes. But I think there was only 3 of us. So most of them were men. And most of them knew how to shoot. They're just going for their concealed carry. And here's little Shirley. Not only does she not know much about firearms, but she's left-handed. Yeah, that's it. Left-handed. Oh, great. How are we going to holster her up? Yeah, so I get the crappy holster that's kind of universal, that you can't pull a gun out of. But the whole time, I was so excited to learn, but so nervous about it. But yet when I left, remember I told you I was scared, intimidated when I first went in? Well, I left with some sort of courage, and I was so confident. My self-esteem was going up. And I felt so good when I left there. And then the more classes I took, intimidation was going downhill, because the more classes I took, They happen to be tactical classes, so less women. And I'm like, okay. So now I'm going to all these classes with all these guys. And what do you guys first do? Back then, what I ended up doing, let's jump back a little bit. I retired from my great career that I thought I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I did retire. And I became the general manager for a gun club. So here I go, I have all these tactical classes going on. I'm checking everybody in, everybody gets signed in, and then they go out to the range, and then here comes Shirley. And they look at me and go, "You're taking the class?" And I went, "Yeah." Because, I just signed them in, and they're going, "Oh, now she's going to come out here and shoot with us." Of course, then the next thing you do, because you get warmed up and you're shooting at your target, and I look out of the corner of my eye, what are they doing? Got to check to see if she can shoot, see if she's safe. But the cool part about all that, after I, get approved, it's like, "Oh, you coming to the next class?" So I'm still welcome, but yeah, it's like, it's a girl and she's taking a tech class, make sure she knows what she's doing, she's not going to shoot me. After I pass that, then I'm okay. So that was fun too. Wow. So, as we know, I talk about domestic violence and how prevalent it is, and it's not just in America, it's worldwide, it's in all different countries. And by definition, that's what a pandemic is. Truly is a pandemic, it affects multiple of the population. So, I want to figure out how to change that. How do we change that? And I truly believe, based on what I've been through, that we can do that by number one, like I said, this is the elephant in the room. We need to talk about it more. Talk about it to our youth, to our young women and kids, so they understand. Number two, we need to be able to defend, women need to be able to defend themselves. We need to teach our youth how to defend themselves. Why? Because I tell you what, when I learned to defend myself, I started hanging out with different people. I didn't accept certain types of treatment by other people. That all changed because what happened is I changed my opinion of myself. So I think we can make a difference if we do that. And it just seemed the natural course of things, because me practicing my Second Amendment gave me my life back. So I need to make sure that the Second Amendment is secure for current and future generations. It only makes sense. So 2 years ago, when I got the phone call from the founder of DC Project, Diana Mueller, they said, "Okay, do you want to be the Florida State Director for DC Project?" And I went, "Yes." And the other thing I found out, the more I get into the firearms industry, the more people ask me to do things, and I say, "Okay," and then I went, I don't know what I volunteered for, but it has to do with the Second Amendment, so it's got to be good. It has to do with firearms, so it has to be good. So that was the case here. So DC Project is a nonpartisan, we're a nationwide group of women that are fighting to secure our Second Amendment, basically, down the roots. And each state has their own state director. We meet with our legislators, we tell them why the Second Amendment was important to us. And then also, a lot of us have our own personal stories, like my story, and how practicing my Second Amendment rights gave me my life back. We all have little stories like that. We also are the counter-visual, counter-voice to Moms Demand Action. You might have heard of them before. And boo, yeah, hurry, I like you. Funded by whom? Bloomberg. They get millions of dollars to spend. We have fundraisers, take donations, we're just grassroots working it. Their color is red, our color is teal. We have teal for 2A, that's what it is. So we wear teal, and you're probably wondering why I have my little teal shoes and my teal shirt. That's because I'm standing for the DC Project. So we're a counter-visual, counter-voice for the gun group, Moms Demand Action. And we're about education, not legislation. We don't need more gun laws. We need to educate people. We need to be able to handle our firearms safely. We need them to understand how important the Second Amendment is to us. So that is our goal. So I'd like to say that I'm very grateful to have been able to come here today and share parts of my story with you. And if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards, because if anybody has any situation you want to talk to me about, you're more than welcome to. I'll be over there selling my book, Heels to Holster. If you want to come over, I'll give you a little signed copy. And you can come just say hi and chat with me. But we really need to stand together and defend our Second Amendment and for ourselves and for the generations to come. And I'm so glad so many of you came out here today. And thank you for listening to me. And you guys are awesome.
That was pretty good. That was pretty awesome. We funded her a little bit yesterday. She came in and we were sitting in the motel lobby down there, and she rolled her little suitcase thing up there. Bad mistake. She took her hand off of it and said, "I like you guys, but I can't find my room key." She went off looking for her room key. Then for some reason, her bag was missing. So, we just met yesterday, so y'all got a break till 11 o'clock. I might mention that there's a couple of politicians you might want to speak to around here, or you might not. So, y'all take a break till about 11.